My name is Joyce. I still remember the night at the family reunion when my father, with a glass raised and a wide smile, introduced me to 40 relatives as the mistake from my first marriage. Everyone laughed. His new wife, Stella, squeezed his arm, and his stepdaughter, Lily, looked down at her shoes. I stood there, holding a glass of water, wearing the same smile I'd practiced for 20 years. But that night, something inside me snapped because I had something on my phone. Evidence I'd been carrying for 3 months, something I never intended to use until he left me with no choice. Let me take you back to how I got here. My parents divorced when I was 8. I clearly recall the morning my father left. He forgot his coffee mug on the counter. My mother, Emily, washed it, dried it, and placed it in a box. She never uttered a single negative word about him. 2 years later, my father, Henry, remarried Stella. She was younger, sophisticated, and her smiles towards me were as cold as ice, brief and polite, with a clear hope that I'd disappear soon. Stella had a daughter from a previous relationship, Lily, who was 3 years younger than me. Within half a year, Lily took over my bedroom at my dad's house. Stella claimed it made more sense since Lily lived there full time while I only visited on weekends. Those weekends gradually became shorter. Stella would call my mother on Friday afternoons, saying, "Henry is exhausted. Maybe next week." And that next week turned into next month and then only holidays. But I still tried. Every birthday I called. Every Christmas, I showed up with a gift wrapped in paper I carefully selected. I'd sit on the edge of the couch as Lily opened her pile of presents, waiting for my father to look at me with the same affection he reserved for her. It never happened. The family Christmas cards arrived at my mother's house every December. They featured Henry, Stella, and Lily, all in matching sweaters, with a cute little puppy, looking like the perfect family straight out of a picture frame. I was never in any of those cards. For 20 years, not once. I used to convince myself it was an oversight, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I kept going back, believing that if I was patient, loyal, and good enough, he'd eventually see me. I was so wrong. The day I graduated from medical school was the proudest moment of my life. 4 years of late, night studying, grueling internships, and a student loan debt that made my head spin. But I did it, graduating in the top 12% of my class. I sent my father 2 tickets for the front row and wrote a note inside the envelope, saying it would mean the world to have him there. He texted back 3 days later, promising he wouldn't miss it. On graduation day, I ironed my white dress. My mother drove 2 hours from her small apartment in the suburbs. We arrived early. She sat in the second row, while my father's seats in the first row remained empty. As the ceremony began, I scanned the crowd. My mother beamed with pride, but the 2 seats beside her were a painful reminder of his absence. I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, and smiled for the camera. When I returned to my seat and checked my phone, there were no missed calls or texts. That evening on social media, I saw a photo of Henry, Stella, and Lily at a music concert. Lily was holding a glow stick, Stella was wearing designer sunglasses, and Henry had his arm around both of them. The photo was posted 2 hours before my graduation. He hadn't forgotten. He'd chosen. My mother found me on the porch that night, still in my white dress, mascara smeared on my wrists. She sat beside me and said, "Honey, stop sacrificing yourself for him." I heard her, but I wasn't ready to listen. "He's still my dad," I replied. She didn't argue, just held my hand. Little did I know that his absence at my graduation was the mildest form of his cruelty. The worst was yet to come. 6 months before the reunion, my phone rang on a Thursday night. I was in the middle of a 12-hour shift at the hospital, running on nothing but coffee and determination. "Joyce, it's Grandma." My 83-year-old grandmother, Rose, said in her no-nonsense tone. "You're coming to the reunion this August. I don't care what your father says." I hesitated. Last year, Henry told me the reunion was for immediate family only, but I later found out from a cousin's post that over 40 people had attended. Stella had posted a group photo with the caption, "The whole family together," and I was nowhere to be seen. "Grandma, I don't think he can decide who's part of the family," I said. Her voice was steady and firm, as if she was speaking from the wisdom of generations. I couldn't say no. Okay, I'll be there, I replied. Good. Wear something comfortable and bring your appetite, she said, and I managed a small smile. It was the first time in a long while that the thought of the family made me feel a glimmer of hope. 2 weeks later, while I was packing for a weekend shift, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, as hospital staff often get a lot of spam calls, but I opened it. Hey babe, as said, Henry's doing the family thing again this summer. You coming to watch the show? I read it 3 times. S was clearly Stella. The message wasn't meant for me. Someone, a man judging from the tone, had the wrong number. It was the number I'd given up when I was 20, the one Stella took over when I changed my phone plan. I stared at the text for 15 minutes. Then I took a screenshot. I didn't reply, didn't block the number. I just saved it and placed my phone face down on the nightstand. For 2 weeks, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just an inside joke between Stella and her friend. But then, the second message came. It was a photo of Stella at a fancy restaurant I'd never seen. A man was sitting across from her, their hands intertwined over a plate of pasta. His thumb was gently rubbing her knuckle, and she was laughing with her head thrown back, completely lost in the moment. The man wasn't my father. Below the photo was a text. Miss you already. Can't wait for our next date.
My heart sank.
I sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours. It wasn't that I cared about Stella's marriage, I didn't. But I realized that this man had my old number saved as Stella's, which meant she was hiding this relationship from my father. I saved the photo and the text in a folder on my phone labeled insurance and locked it with a passcode. I wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had found me. Over the next few weeks, 3 more messages trickled in. A selfie of the man in a hotel room, a voice note I didn't dare to play, and another text that mentioned Tom misses his S. So his name was Tom. A month before the reunion, I drove to visit my mother. We sat in her kitchen, the same one with the old-fashioned curtains. She made her special chamomile tea, too sweet and not cooled enough. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to stay calm. I put down my mug. Rose called me last week. Henry's been talking to a lawyer about updating his will. He plans to leave everything to Lily, the savings account, the property from Rose's trust, everything. Your name isn't on it. I looked at the tea, the honey swirling at the bottom. I don't care about the money, Mom, I said. I know you don't, but honey, it's about him erasing you. If he does it before the reunion, it'll become the family's reality. She was right. If I stayed silent, the reunion would be a coronation for Lily, with Stella as the new matriarch and me as the forgotten footnote. You can't make someone love you, but you can stop letting them hurt you, my mother said. That night, as I drove home with the windows down, the warm summer air filled the car. It wasn't the money that kept me awake. It was a question. If Lily was the daughter he'd chosen, did he even know who she really was? One Wednesday, while scrolling through the messages from Tom's number, not to snoop but to decide if I should tell someone, I found the message that changed everything. It was between a photo of a beach and a heart emoji. Stella had apparently sent Tom a long message, and because Tom's phone thought my number was hers, his reply showed me something I was never meant to see. Tom had written, "Does Lily know about us?" And Stella had replied, "She doesn't know and she never will. H thinks she's mine. That's all that matters." I read it 5 times. Stella had always told the family that Lily was her biological daughter. It was the foundation of their perfect family image. But according to her own words, it was a lie. Lily wasn't her biological child. She'd either adopted or taken custody of her and convinced my father that she was Stella's by blood. My hands shook as I saved the screenshot in the same folder. Then I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and cried, not for Henry or Stella, but for Lily, a 15-year-old girl caught in a web of lies. Finally, the day of the reunion arrived. I pulled into Grandma Rose's farm outside the city at 10 in the morning. The gravel under the tires crunched loudly, like footsteps in a silent church. The farm was as beautiful as a postcard, with a white, painted house and a large porch, surrounded by ancient oak trees. A long table had already been set up in the yard, and someone had strung fairy lights between the trees, which wouldn't turn on until nightfall. Grandma Rose was sitting on the porch in her rocking chair, sipping iced tea. "You're early," she said with a smile. "You told me to bring my appetite, so I thought I'd help out," I replied. She smiled, and we started to carry out the platters. We laid a checkered tablecloth, arranged vases with wildflowers, and set 40 place settings. At one point, she grabbed my wrist gently. "No matter what happens today, hold your head up," she said. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I nodded. Cars started arriving around noon. I saw uncles I hadn't seen in years, cousins with new babies, and great Aunt Mildred with her famous apple pie. Then, at 1:30, a black Mercedes pulled in. Stella stepped out first, wearing a designer dress and large sunglasses, her hair perfectly styled. Lily followed in a cute summer dress, and Henry emerged last, straightening his tie and placing his hands on Stella and Lily's shoulders. They looked like a picture, perfect family. He passed me on the porch without a hug, just a quick glance and, "Oh, you came." Every cousin on the porch heard it. Stella worked the crowd like a politician at a campaign event. "Have you met our Lily?" she'd say, pushing Lily forward. "She's at the top of her class and thinking about pre-med." Lily forced a smile, a trained one that never reached her eyes. When great Aunt Mildred asked me, "And Joyce, what are you up to these days?" Stella was quick to answer. "She's a doctor at the local hospital, working long hours." Bless her heart. If you're not from the South, you might think it's a compliment, but it's a subtle way of brushing someone off. Mildred's smile faltered, and I just poured myself a glass of water and said nothing. I was used to being the background character in Henry's new family story. It was Cousin Jake who pulled me aside near the oak tree. "Hey, Joyce, can I ask you something? Is it true your dad's cutting you out of Grandma's inheritance?" Stella had been talking to Aunt Carol about it last night. The water in my glass stopped moving. I already knew, but it hurt to know she was spreading the news. This wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated move. After dinner, it was time for the family speech, a tradition where the eldest son stands up and talks about family values. Henry pushed back his chair and stood. The sound of the chair scraping the ground silenced the room. "I want to talk about family," he began. He was good at this, with well-timed pauses and warm eye contact. About what it means to be part of this family, about loyalty and legacy. He placed his hand on Lily's shoulder. "I'd like to introduce my real daughter, Lily." Lily stood up, blushing. Henry listed her achievements. Honor roll, volunteer work at the local shelter. Each one was like a medal being pinned on. The table applauded, and Stella dabbed at her eyes. Then Uncle Bob asked, "What about Joyce?" Henry looked at me as if I was an unwanted bill.
"Oh, Joyce.
"She's the mistake from my first marriage," he said and laughed. The others followed, not everyone, but enough to fill the air with their cruel laughter. Stella squeezed Henry's arm. Lily looked down, and I stood there, holding my water glass, my face expressionless, as 40 people decided that my father's cruelty was a joke. But then, I heard the silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after the world stops pretending. The string lights blinked on, and I looked down at my phone in my pocket. I could feel the weight of 3 months of evidence, a folder full of truths that didn't belong to me but had landed in my lap. I looked at Lily across the table. She was just a child, not the villain, but a pawn in Stella and Henry's game. I also noticed Grandma Rose watching me from the head of the table. Her eyes were sharp and full of understanding. She gave me the slightest nod, not a signal to act, but a sign that she was there with me. I touched the edge of my phone, but I didn't take it out yet. I'd spent 20 years confusing keeping the peace with losing myself. I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. Aunt Ruth found me near the flowers. "That was disgusting," she said bluntly. "I'm fine, Aunt Ruth," I replied. "No, you're not, and you shouldn't have to be," she said, crossing her arms. Aunt Ruth was a 50-year-old lawyer, tough as nails. "Did your father tell you he asked me to revise his will?" she asked. "Mom mentioned it," I said. Her jaw tightened. I refused. There's something off about Stella's paperwork. Dates don't match, and a custody document is from a place I can't verify. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face calm. What do you mean? I asked. I'm a lawyer and we notice things. I told Henry to get the documents independently verified, but he said I was being difficult and found another lawyer. She looked at me sideways. Joyce, if you know something about Stella, now's the time to decide what to do. I met her eyes. I'm not sure what I know yet, I said. It wasn't a lie. I had the screenshots, the name Tom, and the message about Lily, but I didn't have solid legal proof. I was still hesitant about what to do. Aunt Ruth walked back to the table, and I stayed by the flowers for a while. My phone felt heavier in my pocket. I went inside to help Grandma Rose clear the dessert plates. The kitchen was warm and smelled of pie and dish soap. I was washing the dishes when I heard the screen door close behind me. It was Stella. She leaned against the counter, arms folded. You should leave before the bonfire, she said softly, but there was a threat in her voice. Grandma invited me, I replied. Rose is old, Joyce. When she's gone, you won't have a reason to come back, she said. For 20 years, I'd thought Stella was just careless, but standing in that kitchen, I realized it was all a carefully constructed plan. Every missed invitation, every snide comment, was part of her scheme to erase me. I told Henry to update the will, and he listened. He always listens to me, she said, as if showing me the key to a locked door. I said nothing. I dried my hands, folded the dish towel, and hung it on the rack. She left the kitchen thinking she'd won, not knowing I held the evidence that could shatter her perfect world. Outside, the bonfire was lit. Henry stood up again, holding a glass of whiskey. I want to make something official, he said. Lily will be taking my last name legally. I've already filed the paperwork. A few people nodded in approval, not realizing the truth. Stella smoothed Lily's hair and said, She's the daughter I was always meant to have. Then Henry turned to me. Joyce, I wish you the best, but let's be honest, you were never really part of this family. At that moment, Lily spoke up. Dad, maybe you shouldn't, she said quietly, almost drowned out by the crackling fire. Sure, this is a family matter, sweetheart, Henry said, patting her hand like she was a pet. Lily sank back into her chair, looking small and defeated. I saw myself in her. She was just another victim of their lies. Great. Aunt Mildred cleared her throat. Henry, Joyce is your blood, she said. Henry didn't flinch. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does, he said, not knowing how ironic his words would become. I looked at the sky, at the stars.
I felt my phone warm against my leg.
Then, Grandma Rose stepped onto the porch with her cane. She moved slowly, but her presence was powerful. Henry, I did not raise you to disown your own child at my table, she said in a firm voice. Henry shifted uncomfortably. Mom, this isn't the time, he said. This is exactly the time, she replied. You chose this stage. Now face the consequences. Stella tried to intervene. Rose, maybe you should sit down. Your blood pressure, she said. My blood pressure is fine, but my patience is running.